Hi, this is Ed Rudiger again, and I got another story for you. And I'll tell you, it's going to be a really good one. I'm excited about sharing it with you. And what a great day to talk about stories. I mean, I don't know how it is where you live. Where you live, is the sun out? Well, it is here. And the sky is blue, and I can hear birds singing and dogs barking. Now, it's a little bit warm, but that's okay because we're coming towards summer. And there's a lot of things you can do during the summer. Now, what are some of the things you enjoy doing the most during the summer? You like to go swimming? You like to play in the yard? You like to get outside, do stuff out there, maybe ride your bike, that kind of thing? Well, I've got a story that's kind of like that. In fact, before I share it with you, I got a question for you. Now, we were talking a minute ago about how you now are thinking about going outside and riding your bike. Some of the kids in my neighborhood draw on the sidewalk. Have you ever done that? They take chalk and draw pictures on the sidewalk. It's really cool. Now, all those things you decide to do, right? Those are things you like to do. But do you remember when you were a baby? Do you remember when you were a baby? Do you remember what you used to do when you were a baby? Well, if you don't, you can ask your mom or your dad or your grandma or somebody there. Because when you were a baby, you know what you did? You laid around a lot. You just laid there. People picked you up. People fed you. People changed your diaper. People carried you around. And you know what you did? Nothing. Sometimes you cried. Sometimes you went coo. They said you played with toys, but you know what you did with toys? You held them in your hand and just shook them around. That's all you did when you were a baby. And your mom and dad or grandma or uncle or aunt, whoever, took care of you when you were really, really, really small because you couldn't take care of yourself. Babies don't decide, oh, I think I'm going to go outside. Baby doesn't decide, oh, I think I'll ride my bike, right? They got tiny little legs, can't ride bikes. Babies don't say, oh, I think I'll draw something on the sidewalk. Babies don't do that. Babies just lie there. And that's fine for a baby, but when you start growing up, you want to do things on your own. And I'll tell you, the story I'm going to share with you today is a story again from the Bible, that same book we were looking at last time, Genesis. And it's a story about the two people that God made, how they kind of grew up. And when they grew up, they found that were going to have to make decisions on their own. And sometimes when you make a good decision, things turn out really well. But if you don't make a great decision, it's more difficult. And they find that out. Now, remember last week we talked about how God made Adam. You remember Adam? Here he is in his little outfit. Only, according to the Bible, Adam was naked. He didn't have any clothes on. We don't want to talk about that. But here, we remember how we made Adam, and Adam was really, really lonely, even though he had this beautiful garden. God gave him a beautiful garden, and in the garden, places to play, and all the food to eat, and all that kind of animals to play with. But Adam was lonely, so he made himself a friend and called her Eve. Now, you remember the stories? And when we left off last time, Adam and Eve were having a good time in the garden. And they were playing and they were running and jumping. And you know what? The garden was great. Because Adam and Eve, they didn't have to work. God took care of them. There was plenty of food. If you wanted food, you just picked it off a tree and ate it. There were plenty of things to play. The Garden of Eden was wonderful because you didn't have to make any decisions. You just sort of like a baby. You just lay there and enjoy yourself because God was taking care of them. But when God made Adam and Eve, when God made you, he gave you something that makes you think, that causes you to think. And you know what that's called? That thing inside of us that causes us to think? Well, it's called a brain. God gave us a brain. And although Adam and Eve were doing fine in the garden, they had a brain. And so they wanted to start doing things that they wanted to do, not just things that God wanted them to do. Or they didn't want to just be taken care of. They wanted to make decisions, kind of like when you decide what show to watch on TV, or when you decide what you want to play, or maybe even when you decide you're at McDonald's and you decide what you want to have. That's what they wanted to do. They so wanted to make decisions. Anyway, but they're in this garden, and the garden is beautiful. Everybody's there, everybody's happy, and everything's going fine. And Adam and Eve, they're playing, and they're running, and they're climbing, and they're doing all kinds of stuff. And one time Eve was just there, kind of by herself. Adam was over doing something else, and she was thinking, this garden is pretty good. There's plenty of food, and there's plenty of sunshine, and we could do a lot of stuff, but I'd like to make some decisions. My brain is telling me, that I'd like to do some stuff. Now, when they were in the garden, God gave them one rule. God said, don't eat from this tree, because when you eat from this tree, he called it the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. When you eat from this tree, then you got to start making decisions on your own. And life gets a little tougher. But if you don't eat from this tree, I'll take care of you. You don't have to worry about anything. And Eve was there in the garden, and she was thinking, I'd kind of like to make some decisions on my own. I'd like to decide what I want to do today rather than just be told. I'd like to decide what I'm going to have for supper. What are you going to have for supper today? I'd like to decide that. I'd like to decide whether I'm going to have a cheeseburger or a chicken nuggets. I'd like to do that. That's the kind of thing I want to decide. And see, in the garden, I can't decide it. God just gives them to me. God just gives me chicken nuggets, whether I want them or not. I'd like to make some decisions. And she was sitting there thinking, and all of a sudden, something comes up to her. And you know what that is? Well, that's my hand, but I want you to think it's a snake. Snake comes up to her. And it says in the story, Snake was really, really smart. Snake was really, really smart. And so the snake starts talking to Eve. Eve is thinking, the snake starts talking. It says, hi, Eve. And Eve says, how you doing, Snake? Oh, I'm doing okay. What you thinking about? And Eve says, well, I was thinking about not only how great this garden is, but, how I'd like to make some decisions on my own. How I'd like to do my own thing. And not always what I'm told to do. Snake says, well, that sounds like a pretty good idea to me. Sometimes I myself like to do that. Why don't you, Eve, eat from that tree that God told you not to eat from? You mean the tree over there? Yeah, I'm talking about the tree over there. With the nice shiny fruit that looks delicious. Why don't you take a bite of one of those, some of that fruit hanging from the tree, one of those fruits hanging from the tree? Eve said, no, I'm not going to do it. God said not to do it. For me to do it, I'd have to make a decision on my own to eat from that tree. And God said, don't do that. Snake says, isn't that what you said you want to do? You want to start making some decisions on your own because you're kind of growing up? And Eve started thinking. She said, well, let me know what you decide. Okay, I'll see you later. And the snake went off. And Eve is there. And Eve is thinking. You know something? That tree does look mighty, mighty good. And I know God told me not to do it, but sometimes, a girl just wants to make her own decision, decide what's right and wrong on her own. And, if I eat one piece of fruit from that tree, God probably won't notice it. It's a great big old tree. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna decide that doing that is the right thing for me to do. So she went up to the tree and she grabbed herself a piece of that fruit and she ate it. And you know what? It was really good. In fact, it was so good, she said, I want to share this with my best friend. And who was her best friend? Yeah, you're right. You're right. Her best friend was Adam, and Adam just standing over there minding his own business. And Eve comes up to him with a piece of fruit in her hand, and she says, Adam. And Adam says, yeah, what is it, Eve? I'm just hanging out here. And Eve says, have you ever wanted to make your own decision and not just do what you're told to do? And Adam said, sometimes I think that'd be a good idea to make our own decision. That'd be feel good. Make me feel like I'm growing up. I'm not a baby anymore. And Eve said, I tell you what we do. I did it, and I kind of liked it. I ate from that tree that God said not to eat from. And Adam said, you didn't. And Eve said, I did. And you know what? That fruit tasted pretty good. Adam said, did it really? And Eve said, yeah, it did. Why don't you have a bite? And Adam says, I don't know. Eve says, why don't you decide for yourself what is right and wrong? God said not to. Why don't you decide this one time for yourself? God won't know it. He'll be happy, in fact. And so Eve gave Adam the piece of fruit, and Adam says, okay, I think I'll do that. And he said, and all of a sudden, boom, their eyes are open. And Adam looks at Eve and says, Eve, I hate to tell you this, but you don't have any clothes on. And Eve looks at Adam and says, Adam, I hate to tell you this, but you don't have any clothes on. And Adam and Eve go, what? This is awful. We can't have no clothes on. We got to do something. And so they start picking leaves from trees, and they sew together outfits. So they aren't running around buck naked. So they got their little outfits. Anyway, they're making some decisions on their own. Well, God is walking, and one day God's walking in the garden because it's so pretty. A day sort of like today. A little bit warm, but the sun was shining, and God was happy. And he was walking through the garden, and Adam and Eve see God. And they said, man, we better hide. And so they hide. And God's looking for them, and he says, something ain't right here. Because usually when I'm in the garden, I see Adam and Eve playing and running and climbing trees. And now they're not doing that. I wonder if they're hiding. So he calls out, Adam, Eve, come here. Want to talk to you. And they come out and they say, what's wrong, God? And God says, were you hiding? And Adam looks at Eve, and Eve looks at Adam and says, yeah, we were. We didn't want you to see us because we're kind of embarrassed. We're wearing these clothes made of leaves, and they don't look real good. And God said, who told you to be embarrassed? And they looked at each other and again and says, we got something to tell you. You see, we wanted to make decisions on our own. And remember that tree you said we shouldn't eat from? We ate from. We decided that was good for us. That's what we wanted to do. And as soon as we made that decision, all of a sudden, we were embarrassed. And so we had to decide to make clothes. And then when you came in the garden, we had to decide to go hide. Now, we got all kinds of decisions to make. Before we didn't have to make any decisions at all. We like babies. Now we got to make all kinds of decisions. And God says, I told you. When you eat from that tree, then you kind of grow up. And you got to make decisions. And as you live your life, the decisions get harder and harder and harder. Right now, all you got to decide is what you want to eat for supper and what kind of games you want to play. But as you get older, you're going to have to decide what you want to do for a living, and you're going to have to decide where you're going to live, and you're going to have to decide how you're going to get food. Those are big decisions. And because you made that decision to eat from that tree, those are the kind of decisions you're going to have to make from now on. And I got to tell you, life is not going to be easy. It's easy when you're a baby. but it won't be easy now. And you know, the saddest thing to me, this is God talking, the saddest thing is you can't live here in the garden anymore. Because see, the garden, everything is provided for you. It's like being in a crib. And I'm like your daddy, and I'm providing everything for you. But when you start making decisions on your own, you can't be in a place like this. You're not a baby anymore. You got to go out in the world and make decisions for yourself. And sometimes they're hard, and sometimes you make mistakes. And so you can't be here anymore. So Adam and Eve walked away out of the garden and wearing their, clothes made of leaves and stuff. And God saw them walking away. And God said, hey, wait a minute, guys. You can't live in the garden. But I'll tell you what I'll do. I still love you. I still love you, Adam, and I still love you, Eve. And those clothes made of leaves, man, that's not going to last. A big wind's going to blow those right away. I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to make you a suit of clothes. And that's what God did. You see, even though these two people, Adam and Eve, disobeyed God by eating from the tree, decided for themselves what was right and wrong, kind of grew up, God still loved them. And that's kind of like your mom and dad. When you grow up and start making decisions for yourself, they may be sad that life is hard, but they still love you. And God still loved Adam and Eve, made them a suit of clothes. And then so he watched them as they walked out of the garden. Adam was going to start farming because he has to grow food. And Eve was going to help him, plow and plant. And both of them had to build a house. So it was going to be a tough life for them. And God watched them as they walked away. And he said, you know something? Even though it's not going to be easy for them, I'm always going to be with them. And I'm always, always, always going to love these two people that I made. And you know what? God loves you too. We grow up and we have to make decisions. But your mom loves you, and your daddy loves you, and God loves you. And God, no matter where you go or what you do, he's going to be there with you. And that's the story of Adam and Eve leaving the garden. I guess you could say it's Adam and Eve growing up. Now, next week, I'm going to tell you another story, and I'm going to give you fair warning. This is not a happy story at all. It's a story about jealousy, about two brothers, and one was really jealous of the other, and it got him into big, big trouble. But we'll do that next week. So until then, I want you to have a great week. Man, I hope the sun is still shining. Well, if the sun stays shining all week, what sort of things do you plan on doing? Okay? Yep, I'm going to go outside too. I love walking my little dog. That's one of my favorite things to do, taking her out. All right, I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you next week with another story. And I want you to remember something. I want you to remember something all week long. I want you to remember it every day. I want you to remember it in the morning, in the evening, and in between. I want you to remember that you are a child of God, and God loves you very, very much. Goodbye until next week.